Photographing Physics: Examples of Physics in the World Around Us by Danica Teodoro. Hello, I'm Danica. I'm a second semester junior graphic design major minoring in advertising and photography. I'm not usually a fan of science, but this class has allowed me to find relations between my interests in science. I learned a lot about the world around me, and I'm excited to share my knowledge with you. This is a photo of one of about 30 succulents on the windowsill in my room. I noticed something interesting which posed the question, why are the leaves of the same plant different shades of green? To understand why the colors were that way, I knew I first had to understand the basics of color and how color is perceived through physics. Our eyes and brains work together to translate light into color. Color is associated with the wavelength of visible electromagnetic radiation. Color is determined first by frequency and then by how those frequencies are combined or mixed when they reach the eye. Color is not in objects, but rather the surface of an object reflects some colors and absorbs others. The colors we see are only what is reflected. We all learned when we were younger that plants appear green because they have chlorophyll. This pigment is what allows plants to convert energy into food. What isn't well known is that there are 6 different types of chlorophyll: A, B, C1, C2, D, and F. Plants are green because the chlorophyll A absorbs the blue-violet light, and chlorophyll B absorbs red-blue light. This results in a reflection of a greenish hue. Plants that get a lot of sunlight have more chlorophyll A and tend to be a lighter shade of green. Plants with more chlorophyll B have darker leaves. Some plants, like succulents, tend to be lighter in color overall as their cells retain more water, so the concentration of chlorophyll is less than other plants. However, chlorophyll isn't entirely responsible for the color of a plant or succulent. A pigment called carotenoid shows hues ranging from yellow to orange, and anthocyanin allow red-purple colors to be shown. When a succulent like the one shown is placed in sunlight, chlorophyll becomes the dominant pigment, leaving the plant a brighter green. However, when plants are given less light, the anthocyanin take over to help protect the plant from UV lights and extreme temperatures, making the plant appear green with a red-purple tint or color. This is a photo of one of the small ponds at the south shore of Moraine State Park. Because I live close by, I drove around Moraine looking for things that were reflective. I realized the lake itself had too much movement for a good photo, then I found a smaller, more still pond as I was starting to leave. While looking for the perfect photo to represent this week's theme, I wondered why movement in the water completely destroyed reflection. To understand why it was that way, I knew I first had to understand the basics of reflection and how it is perceived through physics. Our eyes and brain work together to comprehend the light bouncing off objects and recognize it as reflection. However, many people aren't aware that there are different types of reflection. The 3 most common are mirror reflection, specular reflection, and diffuse reflection. It is dependent on the angle of the surface at which the light reflects to be able to classify it. When looking at an object, you may notice that light bounces off them differently depending on the texture of the surface. This helps explain why reflections differ depending on the angle you look at it. Unstill water follows the first rule of reflection, meaning that the angle of incidence is equal to the angle of reflection. Angles are measured relative to the surface and specific point at which the light ray strikes. Since water is not always still, the light strikes the surface at different angles, causing diffuse reflection. In this case, the original image is reflected in a distorted manner. This affects the level of clarity in the reflection, answering my question as to why movement makes it difficult to see reflection. This is a photo of my miniature donkey. I've had horses and donkeys since I was around 8 years old, and while I always knew they see differently than us, I never bothered to learn why. To understand the difference between human and equine vision, I knew I first had to understand the basics of physics behind the eyes. The variable opening or pupil of the eye, along with chemical adaptation, allows the eye to detect light. Once the light enters, a variety of optical components changes particles of light into neural impulses. Those impulses are then routed to areas of the brain that interpret and identify what we see. The shape of the eye is very important in keeping things we see in focus. If the shape of the eye changes, it affects vision. Because an equine's eyes are longer and larger than humans, they take in more light at a wider angle. A horse's eyes are also set far apart, so its ability to see depth is limited. We may think those as setbacks, but they also have iridescent collagen fibers in the eye that reflect light from the ground into the eyeball, allowing them to see in the dark. Because we rely heavily on sight, it's natural to suppose horses do too, but in equines, acuity, depth perception, and visual content identification are much worse than ours. They compensate for visual weaknesses with excellent hearing and a sense of smell far better than ours. This is a photo of the dam at McConnell's Mill State Park. I have been visiting the park for years but never seemed to notice or question why there was a dam. To understand why there was one at the mill, I first knew I had to understand the basics of dams in general. A dam or mill dam is built on a waterway to create a mill pond. The water that passes through the spillway is used to turn the water wheel and provide energy. When the water level is high, the water has further to fall, which increases potential energy that the mill can harness and use. The structure of the dam at McConnell's Mill is a spillway that was used to power a grist mill until 1928. Spillways specifically are designed to pass water from upstream of the dam to downstream in a controlled manner. On average, 1 cubic foot of water weighs 64 pounds. The water pushes against the side of the dam with a lot of force. To calculate the force exerted on the dam, you take the average pressure and multiply it by the area of contact. You may assume that the dam must apply an equal force against the pressure of the water. However, this is incorrect, and the dam can actually use much less force than the weight of the water in order to hold the water back. This came to be really surprising to me because I assumed that a dam would need to have equal or more force than the water to be reliable. This is a photo of the rail and rail ties on the Kinzua Bridge skywalk at the Kinzua Bridge State Park in Mount Jewett, PA. I visited the park, and while in the museum, I found myself intrigued by the way it was originally built. It made me question what it takes to build a bridge and how physics might explain how it holds that much weight. The Kinzua Bridge is an arch bridge, also known as a viaduct. These types of bridges work by transferring the weight of the bridge and its loads partially onto a horizontal thrust restrained by the abutment on either side. Some of the weight is also reduced through compression tension within the structure. The tension on an object is equal to the mass of the object times the gravitational force plus or minus the mass times acceleration. These forces allow an arch bridge to be built longer than other types of bridges. The semicircular structure of arches allows it to dissipate the force outward, reducing the effects of tension on the underside of the bridge. The greater the degree of curvature, the greater the effects of tension. This is a photo of water droplets on the leaf of my Guyana chestnut tree, aka a money tree that I named Mr. Krabs. As I was watering it, I wondered why leaves wouldn't absorb water when plants need water to live. It made me question biology and physics to explain this hydrophobic phenomenon. Hydrophobic materials are defined by the geometry of water on a flat surface through the angle of a droplet's edge and the surface underneath it, called the contact angle. Hydrophobicity can be categorized into superhydrophilic, hydrophilic, hydrophobic, and superhydrophobic. The shape of the surface can amplify the effects of hydrophobicity. Naturally, this tree grows in Central and South America in freshwater swamps or along rivers. As I researched, I found out that in certain climates, the ability to quickly shed water off its surface provides a survival advantage to some plants. Plants that live in moist environments can develop damaging fungal infections, bacterial infections, or mold growth due to the plant pathogen's love for moisture. Therefore, plants that can keep their leaves dry and clean are more likely to be healthy and reproduce. To help them do so, some plants have a structure called a drip tip, which helps drain water away from the leaf. This helps decrease rainfall interception and increase throughfall to the soil. It allows plants to soak up water more equally and efficiently, allowing for the survival of more plants and plant species in these climates. This is a photo of my dad's truck parked in the grass. I'm not very knowledgeable about cars, so I figured I could learn a little about them by researching wheels and tires and the physics behind them. A car accelerates because the ground pushes on the wheels in reaction to the wheels pushing backward on the ground. This causes friction. Friction is a force that resists the movement of two objects sliding along each other. The force of friction is less than or equal to the coefficient of the friction and multiplied by the normal force. The normal force in this case is the pressure that the ground is exerting upwards to hold the tire up. If the car is still, it is equal to the weight of the car on that tire. If the car is moving, the weight transfer from cornering and acceleration will make the normal force increase or decrease. When the vehicle is accelerating, part of its weight is transferred from the front to rear wheels. Rear-wheel drive vehicles have better acceleration because the increased downforce on the drive wheels accelerates, providing extra grip. One might think that increasing the size of the tires would also increase the size of the contact point and improve traction. However, any changes to the dimensions of the tire, tire pressure, or car weight do not increase the size of the contact point. Changing from a high-profile narrow tire to a low-profile wide tire only changes the shape of the contact point from long and narrow to short and wide, with the area remaining constant. This is a photo taken at Cleveland Rock, part of McConnell's Mill State Park in Portersville, PA. I wondered why the tree roots were sticking out of the ground and wanted to learn more about root growth. One of the first things I wanted to address is how big roots can spread. Tree roots can spread 2 to 3 times the canopy radius and up to 5 times or more in dry conditions. Next, I wanted to address the root structure. The tip of each branched root has distinct regions where cell activities take place. At the very end, there is a meristeme where cell divisions occur. Plants have about a dozen basic cell types that are required for everyday functioning and survival. After cells divide, they go through a process called elongation. This involves yielding the cell wall under the action of tensile stresses on the wall. The rate of elongation R can be expressed simply through R equals mW, where m is the extensibility of the cell wall material and W is the wall pressure. Cells then stop elongating and start differentiating. Stem cells are divided into several categories according to their potential to differentiate. This undertakes major changes in size, shape, and metabolic activity and overall function. Cell growth is also affected by the physical environment. Soil is very different and diverse depending on where it is located. Therefore, it has different ratios of building blocks. These form the soil's basic texture. The small particles of silt, sand, and clay lump together to form beds or aggregates. The shape and size of these beds determine soil structure. Texture and structure impact how water and other liquids, air, and roots interact with the soil. In general, roots are very complex branch systems whose topology and structure determine the entire physiology of the plants above them. The rate and direction of the root tip growth are influenced by the signals they receive from the environment and the organization of the internal tissue. As root tips explore, the signals help them seek out the most efficient path to water and nutrients. The composition of the soil also influences the architecture of the root system. Roots constantly explore their space and steer through gravitational and electromagnetic fields. They also experience the mechanical and chemical properties of the soil they live in. These kinds of root responses are known as tropisms. Here's a visual recap to summarize all the objects I was able to learn more about through this physics class. Thank you for watching this presentation. I really enjoyed learning with all of you.